Welcome to Week 7 of SEC Football. This video series will focus on all SEC games that were played, basically going over highlights, lowlights, and anything interesting. After getting ravaged by Texas A&M, number 22 Mizzou traveled to the 1-5 UMass, and it went about how you'd expect. Brady Cook threw for 219 yards and a touchdown, while Marcus Corral rushed for 91 yards and 3 touchdowns. The game was never close, as Mizzou would win 45-3. Moving on.
I'm sad. It's too bright. I want to go back in the box.
Coming off that terrible loss to the SEC powerhouse known as Vanderbilt, number 7 Alabama would host South Carolina, who is coming off its own loss by Ole Miss at home. Alabama would trick us in the first drive, which resulted in a 75-yard touchdown drive that they were back to offensive form, but quickly fell off afterwards. They would score again towards the 5-minute mark of the second, making it 14-0. But then Alabama would give up 12 points in 2 minutes with a 4th down touchdown to the Gamecocks, an intentional grounding in the end zone by Milroe for a safety, and an interception by Milroe in the waning seconds to allow a field goal.
What is happening?
The Gamecocks would then score on their second half opening drive to take the lead 19-14. The major problem with the Gamecocks was keeping the football under control as they fumbled 3 times, one which set Bama up to take the lead 20-19. Bama would score again on a touchdown pass to a wide open Bernard. Then Alabama, as is fashionable as of late, did everything in its power to let South Carolina back into the game. With 2 minutes left on the clock and no timeouts, South Carolina marched down the field to score a touchdown, but failed the 2-point conversion, making the score 27-25. The Gamecocks would then recover an onside kick after the ball dinked off 2 Bama players to set up prime position to get into field goal range. Kane Womack finally remembered he does not have to do prevent defense and did 3-0 blitzes in a row. What a shock! Pressuring the quarterback is a good idea. Alabama was given one more chance to do something stupid, as the final heave to the end zone was picked off by Kyrie Jackson, near the 2, who willingly walked into the end zone, and if the South Carolina tight end Harbor committed to tackling him in the moment, it would have been a safety and sent the game to overtime. Thank God that did not happen, because I don't think my heart could have taken it. Alabama wins 27-25. The first ever Red River rivalry, number 18 Oklahoma would host the number 1 team in the nation, Texas. The big headlines this week was that the Sooners would be playing a true freshman at quarterback, Michael Hawkins Jr., and Quinn Ewers would be taking back the reins from Arch Manning for the Longhorns. Ewers would start the game with an interception, and that would be the first and last major mistake by the returning QB. Oklahoma would draw first blood, but that would be the only scoring they did for the day. Ewers would throw a touchdown early in the second quarter, and it was all Longhorns. They would rush for 3 touchdowns and have 406 total yards to Oklahoma's 237. The Longhorns won 34-3. Number 5 Georgia welcomed 1-4 Mississippi State to Athens. Georgia was coming off a win against Auburn, and MS State is having a terrible year and lost the previous weekend to Texas. The game started with Carson Beck throwing a tipped interception, allowing MS State to get the first points with a long field goal. Georgia would then tie it with a field goal and then score a rushing touchdown by Branson Robinson. Georgia would kick another field goal, but MS State would get a 75-yard chunk play on a pass from Michael Van Buren Jr. and then score a touchdown, cutting the game to 13-10. Georgia was not comfortable with being so close and scored 21 unanswered points to go up 34-10. Mississippi State would try for a comeback, getting within 10 points, but a late Travis Etienne rushing touchdown would put the game out of reach. Georgia wins the game 41-31. Carson Beck had 459 yards passing in this game, but now has 5 interceptions on his record this year and travels to Texas next week. He will need to shore up, as that game will most likely be a shootout, and 1 interception could spell doom for the Bulldogs. Number 8 Tennessee faces off against 3-2 Florida. The Volunteers are coming off a loss to Arkansas to cap off a bad weekend by top 10 SEC teams, and Florida defeated UCF at home. Tennessee would start the game by fumbling the ball, allowing the Gators to recover. Florida would go up by 3 with a field goal. Both teams would then start punting and exchanging turnovers until finally in the third, Florida would go on a 92-yard drive to score another 7 thanks to Mertz throwing a touchdown to Boardingham. Florida would then show us how to properly start choking by letting the Volunteers score 17 points. Florida would not go quietly, however, as they would tie the game in the waning moments of the fourth quarter to force overtime. However, they were pitiful in their one and only drive, losing 4 yards and missing the field goal wide right. Tennessee would methodically move down the field until running back Dylan Sampson punched in the 1-yard touchdown to win the game, and the Volunteers got to celebrate their win in their garbage truck convention of a stadium. Final score 23-17. How is Napier? Still got a job. Number 13 LSU would entertain number 9 Ole Miss in Death Valley. LSU beat South Alabama the previous week, a real surprise, and Ole Miss defeated South Carolina. The first quarter would be quiet for both teams until the second, when Ole Miss would score 10 points. LSU would respond with a touchdown of their own, thrown by quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. Jackson Dart would then throw a touchdown to go up another 7. LSU would kick a field goal to end the second, 17-10. No, wait. Ole Miss running back Parrish coughed up the ball, and LSU gets a free 3 points to close the half. Hopefully that won't affect Ole Miss in the slightest. The third quarter was boring, as both teams exchanged field goals. Most of the fourth would be scoreless as well, when Ole Miss would pull away by 7 with a field goal, with only 3 minutes left to go. LSU had a solid drive, and on a 4th and 5, Nussmeier would pass to Aaron Anderson for a 23-yard touchdown to tie the game 23-23. The game went to overtime. Ole Miss would have the first go, but had to get a lucky or skillful 57-yard field goal as penalties backed them up, and would have to rely on their defense to win the game or at least force double overtime. The Ole Miss defense would then proceed to give up a 25-yard pass on the first play from Nussmeier to Lacey for the game-winning touchdown. The final score was 29-26. The powerhouse of SEC football, coming off an expected win against bottom feeder Alabama, Vanderbilt traveled to Kroger Field to face off against Kentucky, who had their bye last week, but beat Ole Miss at their home in their last game. Vanderbilt would score on their first drive, and then Kentucky would respond in kind. Vandy quarterback Pavia would throw an interception, but Kentucky would give it back with a fumble from Dane Key. At the end of the second quarter, Pavia would get his second passing touchdown of the day to Richie Hoskins, and the Commodores would take the lead going into the half. The second half was not very entertaining as Vandy would kick 2 field goals to advance their score to 20-7. The Wildcats would score a touchdown but fail an extra point try. They would have a chance to tie the game after forcing Vanderbilt to punt, but penalties stunted the drive. They failed to convert a 4th down, giving Vandy the win. Vanderbilt has now beaten 2 SEC teams back-to-back, and honestly, how are they not ranked? And that concludes Week 7. The 2 overtimes from Ole Miss and LSU and Florida and Tennessee was pretty crazy. Honestly, I can't get over Vanderbilt. Even though they embarrassed my Crimson Tide, I cannot help but love the Rapscallions. I hope to stay on top of this and make these videos a weekly thing until the very end of the season. I have my pro football and Alabama video I am still working on, and another project I am very excited about. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.